You are now tuned in to the Project 365 experience.
So it is with great pleasure that we welcome Her Excellence,
Holy.
right? Former NCAA Division I player, overseas professional. She dibbled and dabbled into being a national scout, recruiting talent, just paying attention to what was going on the Canadian scene, transmitting the information to coaches, informing everybody of what Canada had to offer. And now you could currently find her as the director of basketball operations at Layup, Miss Micaëlla Riché. How are you? How are ya?
I'm wonderful. Much better now that I'm finally on your podcast. So thank you for having me. Very excited to talk today.
You're too nice. You're too nice. I'm excited for this one because I think you have a very unique journey. You have been able to go through being a player, go through coaching. Something I forgot to mention is that you also got the chance to be on a Division I staff, right? After having played. And just being able to do that and then go a little bit into scouting and now kind of being able to be one of the leaders in coaches education. So I want to know, how has your playing experience shaped your coaching experience?
That's a great place to start. I think you coach how you were coached, right? You coach opposite of how you were coached because you didn't like certain things. I think especially on the Canadian scene, a lot of coaches are parents, they're volunteers, they're people who have great intentions and not a ton of information. Even going into the NCAA, like you said, I coached at Kansas State, and getting that job was just like, are you cool? Taking the word from my other coach and like, okay, cool, you're coaching the post players, you're doing scouting reports. So I think that as a player and in my previous coaching experiences, it's always been just kind of like, coach how you've been coached, use what you think works and what makes sense to you. And what we don't realize, and now in my position at Layup, doing a lot of coach education, using incredible resources like Nike's coaching made to play resources, Center for Healing and Justice through Sport and their resources, we learned that a lot of coaching behaviors are very toxic. And a lot of us who made it through these player pathways were very much only the strong survive. And so I think that having been a player and having been able to be resilient, to be tough, to grind through a lot of challenging things that you kind of think are normal because that's how your friends are coached, that's how you were coached growing up, you don't see otherwise. I think being a player has definitely shaped a lot of how I used to approach coaching, and a lot of the research that I've been able to do in the last 3 years has completely transformed a lot of my views on coaching. So I'm excited to get into it a little bit more.
You said toxic behaviors.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about different toxic behaviors, because the one thing that I kind of started paying attention to is that a lot of times, like, we'll do things like out of reflex, like you said, we learn those behaviors and we just kind of like operate in that way. But a lot of times, like, those toxic behaviors, we don't know what kind of effect it could have on a athlete. We don't know what kind of effect it could have on a parent who's just sending their kid to you, not necessarily to be great at basketball, but to be able to have some kind of social balance to their life, right? So when you mentioned toxic behavior, I kind of wanted you to kind of dive into and show the extremes, show what is overly toxic based on what you've seen, but also like something that maybe people have done that is might not be seen as it, but not knowing the internal impact it could have.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak from personal experience. I think one of the big things that has been a theme throughout a lot of my playing journey was always my weight. And coaches would comment on that and comment about the weight itself, as opposed to commenting about like, let's make sure we're eating healthy, we're fueling our body. Let's make sure we're training for performance, right? And so I think certain ways of framing things goes a long way in terms of like promoting healthy performance as opposed to promoting eating disorders or some of those issues, right? I think another thing would be manipulation. I had a coach who would kind of be like, hey, act super cool, be like, what y'all do on the weekend? Then you come in practice, you miss a layup, and they're using what you did on the weekend as why you're missing that layup, right? So I think, and those are some examples on one end of the spectrum. I've seen examples on the other end of the spectrum where coaches are throwing basketballs at players or putting them through incredibly shameful like positions. There was a football program that would have players wear this brown t-shirt. They had to wear it the whole week. And if you have the brown t-shirt on, you know that you either slept through a workout or you missed class or whatever. So that piece of like shaming people, I think is something that can be a motivator, because I won't ever be late again if I have to wear the brown t-shirt, right?
Yeah.
However, what are kind of the impacts and the repercussions? And again, for myself, I can use this weight example because it's something that's continued to be this voice in my head throughout my whole life. You know what I mean? And so I think that had I been coached in a way that was focusing on performance and fueling my body versus lose weight, there would have been some different results to kind of what happened. So, and I mean, I've seen it to all sorts of extremes. There's a lot of, and as players, especially women, you just want to please your coach. You just want to do exactly what they said, and you want to do it at the best of your abilities. And so there's this piece of constantly being criticized and sometimes demeaned and embarrassed or whatever it may be, that I think just doesn't really get you the results that you want and doesn't really foster positive mental health, and which doesn't translate to positive performance.
Whew. Holy. This is great because like I think so I approach coaching in a different way because like I wasn't like the one that was naturally athletic, naturally gifted, right? So like I had to find other ways for me to get validation from my coaches, get validation from my peers and all that kind of stuff, right? So circling back to what you were saying, I think that's one of the reasons why you'll notice that, and I guess this is kind of like a tangent where I'm talking a bit about the behavior of men in women's sports, because I think what ends up happening is we think that as men we could just go into that space because we know basketball and just project in a way our insecurities on these women, but the experience of coaching, the experience of basketball, the experience of being an athlete itself is completely different in all of us. And this is not just men and women, but like you said, I think the big part that what I realized was that I got the opportunity to coach women. And like you said, it's a big part of it is just, I just want to make sure, I just want to please my coach. I just want to have a great experience. Yep. Right. So I think there's kind of like that misunderstanding that once you know basketball and you know X's and O's, you're going to be the greatest. You're going to be like, you're going to automatically win and all that. So this is long-winded to kind of explain, like, to ask you this question. How important is women, the representation of women in sports? Because what I've seen is it's such a market that is, you know, we're not going to hide it. It's very male dominated. There's more males like participating in like sports, just overall, whether it's in position of power and all that kind of stuff. Right. So, what I've noticed is the women that actually take this cause and dive into it and that are on the platform and that are in the field, those are women that kind of like stand out in a way, because if you persevered for that long into that field, you have a specific reason why you want to do what you want to do. So I want to ask you, why is it important to have women representation in sports?
I think that's a multifaceted question. I think, again, speaking for myself, some of my best coaches have been men. And I grew up middle child of two brothers, and like I'm in a space where certain behaviors or certain types of coaching I was able to relate to more and appreciate more. I think a lot of times when men coach women, there's a small difference. So women will want to come into a space and they love to compete. A lot of people think women don't like to compete, they just want to make friends. But a lot of times women will come into a space and girls will come into a space and they need to get a little acclimated to who's here, what's happening. So they need to connect first to be able to compete. And then performance comes from that.
Become exactly the self-fulfillment part.
Men will come in and they'll compete.
I'm a hooper.
Right. And they perform and then they make friends because of that performance and that competition.
Right.
I think simply understanding that when you're coaching a group of women, and sometimes men too, because for example, at Layup, these principles that we use them in our co-ed space and we use them in our Sky High, which is our girls only program space. So giving people a time and space to connect and see like who's in the space, let me like figure this out and then get into competition and then get into performance, I think is just a simple swap of those things that a lot of men can implement when coaching women. As far as the representation piece, I mean, I've personally fallen into the positions that I've had because I worked my butt off and I was a good teammate, etc. But also because I had people who were in spaces that saw dots that I didn't know to connect, right? So as a female in sport now, when I see younger women who I'm like, you have it. And a lot of women self-select themselves out of coaching. I don't know the X's and O's that well. I don't know what play to draw up if we're tied with 6 seconds to go. I don't know how to run whatever those things may be. They tend to self-select themselves out of these coaching positions, out of these opportunities. And you sometimes need that mentor or that other person in your corner to be able to see, no, look, I went through it. Here's how you can connect some dots and you can do it too, right? So not only the piece of like, if you see it, you can be it, which is great and very valuable, but also that piece of if I have women who are intentionally looking out for me in different spaces, they're going to help me connect dots for things that I don't even know are things yet. And then be able to open doors and speak my name in spaces that I'm not in. So I'm here for women in representation, but I will not undervalue the role that incredible male allies and mentors have played for me in my career. So yeah, I think that there is a space for men in the women's game, but I also do think that there's a piece of I never thought I could be a ref. I never thought I could be a coach. I never thought I could be an administrator or a director of basketball. I never thought of these things because I never saw it, right? So I think that now I love to see Hoop Queens, for example, come into the city, giving exposure to not only myself, but other incredible women in the industry. And the amount of young girls that are looking at Kisa, like I can be that, or I can strive for more, or maybe, or Olivia or Demi, the DJ, you know, there's so many women who now that there's younger girls looking at these things, the kind of realm of possibilities and the realm of inspiration, especially with the culture of basketball, because there is so much that in and around the culture. So to have women in these spaces, in these roles, I think just kind of like gets your creative juices flowing in that they wouldn't have necessarily.
Right. And you're even talking about like just even us, we got the opportunity to get like a WNBA game in Toronto. Like just like I can only imagine how because you got to be able to, like you said, you see it, you believe it, you know, like I give a lot of credit to those that kind of persevere with just a vision, you know, but being actually able to see it, like it pays dividend. Like you're looking at the women's college game now, blowing things out of proportion. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it was showcased the way that it was when you played in there.
Definitely not. No. And NIL has completely changed the game. I love to see how many more women, and these stats may be wrong. I haven't done my NCAA research, but I think women are getting paid more in NIL and have more deals in NIL than men do, right? I think social media changed the game. Cheyenne and Tasha put the Canada on the map with the game, and like the girls who've come after them are now on a different pathway because of that exposure, right? So I think from the NCAA to local social media and prep programs that are doing a great job, I think the game is different. The game is different. And the WNBA, I think it was last year, a couple years ago, got like 500% increase in watching games simply because they actually put it on TV. Right. So, and you're always going to get the people who are going to make sandwich comments. They probably can't count to 10. That's their business.
Yeah.
But like, I think that simply investing in the game and investing in women is going to have a high return.
For sure. So you transitioning into you playing, you got the opportunity to start off, you know, I did my research, L'Oreal Academy, you know, and then you go to Minnesota.
Yep.
Like, think like what was the difference? Like you go from playing sports, like, and it's still growing. It's still growing, like in high school sports. It's still kind of like in that beginning phases, and then boom, you go NCAA. Like what things did you learn along the way, and what shocked you when you headed over there?
What shocked me was that I thought I was ready, and holy moly, life comes at you crazy. I think the business of sport became very real because my coach is paying her bills and making her livelihood based on my performance. So she's going to be on my case and on every one of my teammates' case, right? So I think that the business of sport became very real. I also think that to a certain extent, and I'm so thankful that my mom was very involved in my recruitment process, and Minnesota was one of the first schools to recruit me from way back when. But this piece of you are a number and you are points on the board, you are rebounds, you are whatever, right? So I think that as a player coming in and really realizing that like my performance determines a lot of my value and keeping my identity separate from that. And I didn't know it at the time. I know it now, right? And I'm able to now go to runs and like if I lose in a run, like I'm not losing my mind because my identity is not winning that run or not, right? So I think also controlling my emotions, and I didn't realize that I was that my teammates looked at what I did, or that my teammates, you know, I've always been kind of the person that's like, if I handle my business and my slate is clean and my sprints are run and my homework is done, etc., like I'm good. But there's this piece of sportsmanship and of teamwork that like my work can be done, but if my teammate's late to whatever, that's on me, right? So I think there's this piece of ownership over the team and the mission as a whole that also became more real in university. Because in high school, you're trying to get recruited and one of you is going to get picked. It's not often that, you know, a group goes somewhere. So it's very like kind of like more self-motivated. But at the next level, it's a whole different type of ownership for the team and for yourself. And then like personal growth, controlling my emotions, right? I was not allowed to like punt a basketball into the stands if I'm mad that I'm missing layups. I can't do that, right? I'm a leader on this team. I think that there was a piece of obviously time management and discipline, which I've always been a very disciplined person growing up. So that wasn't a huge transition for me, but I just think that you just have to very much be on the same page with everybody else, and you run as a unit and you move as a unit and you win as a unit and you lose as a unit. And it's now from a business side, not from a fun and game side. So there is a real cost to what you do or don't do.
Yeah. How did you deal with being, because you go from kind of like from a culture of basketball where, you know, coaches maybe are not, that's not their livelihood, right? Like just the basketball in most cases. But then after you go to one where, hey, listen, I'm putting pressure on you because I need to win, because if team doesn't win, the coach is thinking, okay, I'm getting fired, right? Yeah. How did you kind of like deal with that? Was that like hard to manage at the beginning?
It's not that it was hard to manage because I think I was doing it for the right reasons. And I remember a few times throughout my career at Minnesota thinking, you could not pay me enough money to be doing this. You have to love it. You know what I mean? And I think that obviously, like for me, I started playing basketball late, and I started playing because my brother played, and I saw him having team parties and traveling, going to hotels, eating out, and I was like, I want to do that.
It's lit.
I started playing. And then when I started actually working on the craft and getting better so quickly, I was like, dang, this was very satisfying, and it became very addicting. So to get to the next level and being able to see, now I have a whole next set of resources with strength and conditioning coaches, training table, treatment and therapy, right? So there was a whole next set of resources to make me even better. Position coaches, right? Just like a different level of basketball. So for me, I was always very intrinsically motivated. I remember my coaches sometimes calling me, being like, yo, you better not be doing any extra workouts, because they're trying to periodize training, and I'm running 3 miles a day just because I feel like it, right? So
so you created load management, not Kawhi.
I now create load management. I'm still trying to hoop, but these are like, nah, you got to hoop for 4 months out of the year, and then the rest of it, just ride your bike and do some yoga. So, but yeah, no, I was very intrinsically motivated, and I see it now, and I saw it when I was at Kansas State as a coach, that there are players who are here not because they love basketball and they want to be great, because they happen to fall into a scholarship, and now they're here. And those players didn't often make it through because they weren't there for those right reasons.
Talk about that. Talk about how many, it's the sad reality of life. The higher level you go, you think it's supposed to be more professional, more people but think about how many people that are in the NCAA just because they're naturally gifted at basketball. Think about how many professionals are in the NBA, because I hear stories. A lot of people are in the NBA don't even love basketball.
Yep. I mean, I think loving, it's interesting that you use the word love basketball, because I'll use the relationship example of, you love a person, so you go into a marriage. 20 years down the road, you don't have no more butterflies. That love is a choice. That love is a commitment, and you have to continue to move forward with the discipline and with the execution, even though you might not feel love for it anymore. So I think as soon as basketball becomes a business, as soon as basketball becomes your job, you're going to have glimpses of remembering that you love the game, but you probably don't feel the same way about it as you would feel. And like for me right now, playing Hoop Queens in the summer, playing 3-on-3, I love basketball. Throughout the year, I'll practice with TMU, I'll practice with York. I love going to practice and playing, because it's not my job anymore. Playing is not my job anymore. Performing is not my value anymore. So there's a certain level of freedom and of joy and of fun that you can have that translates into performance. But I think that when I saw it at the NCAA level, back to your question, not only on the player side, but on the coaching side, I think that's where, for players, for example, if you are very naturally athletic, there's also players, I think the game now with the portal and transfers, you see a lot of it, because players come into a school and they're unhappy with whatever situations and they leave. That wasn't as much of an option when I was a player. You had to sit, there was the rules, there wasn't the portal. So if you leave, you're kind of just like making calls on your own, hoping your coach is helping you. Excuse me. So I think that like there is a piece of passion and drive and intrinsic motivation that players have to have, because there's been moments where I wanted it for players more than they wanted it for themselves. And not only is it frustrating for the players, but it's frustrating as a coach. And it's now a business. So I don't care how you feel. And neither do your coaches, and neither does the other team. You are now performing because it's your job, because you committed to this, and because you have to be disciplined and show up day in and day out, or punch out and go do what you want to do. But that's not any easier than being a player. And that's where I think a lot of young players are making mistakes, is they always think the grass is greener, and they always think it shouldn't be this hard, but it's the hardest thing you'll ever do.
Right.
Here for it or not. And it only gets harder. I graduated Minnesota and I got to Kansas State as a grad assistant, and I was like, this is what my coaches have been doing? Yo, I was chilling. And then I got to Greece and I played pro, and that was a whole next type of challenge. And then as an adult, like I'm like, adulthood is the worst hood I've been in. Like, right? So like, you constantly think that things are going to get easier or get better. But one thing I've learned throughout my journey, and I've had a lot of chapters kind of quickly, is that what I learned at Minnesota, I would not have been able to do what I did at Kansas State without that chapter and without mastering that chapter. And I think unless I went into Minnesota with every single thing I could have given to it, I wouldn't have mastered it, and I wouldn't have gotten what I needed to get from it, because half-ass effort gives you half-ass results. And a lot of times people expect good results from half-ass effort, and the math ain't mathin'. So
yeah, for sure. So like, at what point do you kind of like start thinking, because then there's a whole period, like usually there's that everybody goes through that period where it's like you're trying to figure out what the next step is. So like you're thinking playing pro, you're seeing you're having success now on the other side of basketball, which is more like the staff part. Like what makes you kind of like transition into like, first of all, what makes you stay attached to the game? And two, what makes you kind of like decide, okay, I can do something aside of playing past basketball when you're leaving Kansas State?
Yeah. So, what was the first question? What makes me stay
attached to the game?
I tried to quit basketball. I tried to get out of working in basketball. I tried to be a regular person so many times in my life. And something about the game just keeps pulling me back in. In part, like I said, the people who I surround myself with, because those people would see opportunities that I wasn't looking for and be like, Micaëlla would be perfect for that, and send it to me. That's how I got to layup, right? I think that there is a piece of, again, when I was a player, it feels like it was so long ago, but 2010 to 2014 in university, that I thought if I'm not in the weight room, running on the court, or doing my homework, I'm wasting my time. So I never allowed myself to tap into any type of other alternative, whether it's creative things or side interests that weren't related to basketball, because I thought this isn't a part of my mission. This is wasting my time. So I think that there's a level now where you see photographers, videographers, you see sneakerheads, you see the league fits, you see music, right? Art. If you look at the culture of the game, I can name drop 6, 7, 8 different people top of mind who I'm like, you are doing incredible things that are directly related to basketball, that are not coaching, that are not playing, and that are not refereeing. Right. So I think that the exposure to those opportunities, and Toronto is such like a creative cultural hub of like people doing entrepreneurial things that are just so inspiring, that I think the youth now have exposure to different types of things. You look at some of the young players who are doing Nike shoots, some of these young kids in high school who are able to go and do give and grow workshops with right? So there's different opportunities in and around the culture at a younger age that I encourage players to tap into, because not only will it prevent burnout, but it is related to the game, and it is related to you as a person. You are bits and pieces of so many different things that make you you and that make you unique. And so for me, never having given myself that space, I think burned me out from basketball so much quicker. It needed to, because I was just eat, sleep, breathe, scouting reports, gyms, basketballs, right? Again, I started playing late. I had exposure to basketball as a young girl, and then the game never was like, ooh, I want to do that. I have teammates who were like 5 years old. They were just obsessed with like dribbling the basketball and shooting in their little net. I'm like, that wasn't me. Not me. Right. So I think, what kept me attached to basketball, in my role now, I don't coach kids. I don't train. I'm not on the court like that. I'm very much behind the scenes, but I'm behind the scenes in a way that's so dynamic and so different every day. And that does tap into bits and pieces of myself. I'm a nerd. I love school. I love research, and I get to do a lot of it in my job to be able to make coaches better, right? To be able to make programming better, to have better outcomes for the kids who are participating in the programs that we deliver. So I just think that what's kept me in basketball up until now, 31 years old, which is crazy to say that I'm still working full-time in basketball, is being able to take bits and pieces of different things that make me me and put those together.
Right. Yeah, because you're very artistic. I've seen a bit of your work. Like you be
I would
creative.
never, and I would never call myself someone artistic or creative.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was until it was like, okay, here's what we have to do. How do you create a drill to make these things happen? And then you kind of get to shape it, or coaching, or you know what I mean? So I just think that, again, I wouldn't have discovered these things unless I gave full effort into so many different pathways. And that was one of the benefits of being a graduate assistant.
Mhm.
Trying so many different things. I was doing everything from scouting reports to equipment inventory to coaching post players to everything in the weight room, in the therapy room. So if you get that opportunity to be in a position that has kind of like rotations, or that gives you opportunities to try different things, my thing is just go and like really actually buy into it. Because I can't say I do or I don't like this unless I really, really, really try it full effort.
Mhm. So it's funny because like I I think you guys I saw this on your website because I went on your website and I read up a bit about the different things that you guys offer at Layup, and I saw a saying that said I can't remember if it's every child or every athlete needs a team.
Every kid needs a
Every
team.
kid needs a team. That's dope. That's dope.
It's true.
So I want to know like where did that come from, and like what do you guys mean by that? I kind of have a sense, but I want to know what the true definition of it is.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, especially who know my background and who see Layup, think Layup is another basketball program. But Layup is a charity, it's a youth charity, and we use basketball as sport for development. So maybe one kid every 5 or 6 years or 10 years will come out of Layup and really have a whole career and profession in basketball. We use sport for development, and when you look at a basketball team, you have 12 players. You might have had 50 at tryouts. Of those 12 who were picked, the other 38, my math isn't excellent, the other 38 may be able to go play club, right? Play for whatever other programs. But there's always, let's say of the 38, another 12 make a next team. What about the rest of the kids? And you know how hard it is to find gym time and gym space in Canada.
Sure. Yeah.
And if you play outdoors, okay, you've got maybe 3 months, maybe 4 months if you're really like balls to the wall out of the year to play basketball. So when we look at the benefits of physical activity, when we look at how beneficial being on a team, feeling a sense of belonging, having manageable challenges, being given opportunities to contribute when you're in a space, when you look at the value of those things in the development of kids, a lot of them never have the opportunity to play on a team, the opportunity to be a part of a real basketball program, right? And so when we say every kid needs a team, Layup serves neighborhood improvement areas across the GTA. We're in 9 different neighborhoods right now. We use the Learning Opportunities Index to determine what schools we're going to be in. So sometimes we've got programs in Richmond Hill or Markham asking us to come do, no, we're not going there. Right? So you look at kids who don't have those opportunities, and then even the club structure, you look at hockey in Canada. If I'm a parent and my kid wants to play hockey, I go to the hockey rink that's in probably every neighborhood, sign the kid up, and they'll find a team for this kid to play on, and the kid will have practice every week, games every week for however many months of the year. Right. That's not established like that in basketball. One, because TDSB is one of the biggest stakeholders of gyms in Toronto. Right? So if you're using gym space in a school, there's permits that are a barrier. There's school time that's a barrier, right? And so when you look at all these different types of challenges, there's a lot of kids who never have the chance to play basketball. And then you look at girls, and if there's open gym at lunchtime, how many girls are going to have the confidence and the skills to walk into a gym and say, I got next?
True.
Right? So we say every kid needs a team. Our focus is to create gyms for all levels of skills and abilities, and to be able to create spaces where kids come in and they feel a sense of belonging. They feel like they have something to contribute. I don't have to be the highest scorer, but maybe coach asked me to demonstrate the drill, right? Maybe coach asked me to give a shout out to my teammate, whatever that may be. And then the manageable challenges, because if you ask me to do a backflip right now, that's not a manageable challenge. If you load it with somersaults and maybe trampoline work or whatever the progression pathway is into doing a backflip, I'm going to go step by step by step with those manageable challenges. And not only am I going to eventually do a backflip, but every single step that I get better, I'm going to build more confidence and more self-assertiveness. And I'm going to start to believe in myself a little bit more. And not only will I be like, dang, I can actually do a backflip, but now when someone's like, oh, can you do, I don't know, can you shoot a basketball? I'll be like, you know what? I can't, but because I can now do a backflip and I couldn't, I can probably do this too. And so just that piece of confidence and of being able to reap the benefits of being a part of a team, reap the benefits of physical activity. That's what we strive to give to kids, because you don't realize how inaccessible basketball is until one, I checked my privilege, and until two, you really start to look at who didn't make the team. Right. Now, where did they go? And
where
then
did they go?
That team. And then where did they go? And who left without playing basketball, without the opportunity to play? So we believe every kid is a team, and we go to these neighborhoods so that the kids don't have the barrier of transportation. They don't have to take an hour bus or a 2-hour bus to get to that gym. They don't have to pay the cost. They don't have to provide their own equipment. We give them jerseys, we give them basketballs, all of that, right? And so just being really intentional about what are the barriers that are being faced and how do we provide an equitable experience to basketball.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're gonna get into like just in terms of like curriculum, what you guys do and like programming and that kind of stuff. But something that's very underrated is the camaraderie that you have with the people that you work with, right? Like it's got to be a vibe. Like, you know, even me, like from a head coaching standpoint, when I have my staff, it's got to be staff that, you know, I'm not saying they have to agree with everything I say, but we got to be very close for us to be able to get on that point where we're going to tell each other the real. We like hanging out with each other, et cetera, et cetera. Like it almost has to be like a really good atmosphere.
Yeah.
Talk about the atmosphere at Layup with all your coaches, because every time I see you guys are always like this, like close.
Yeah.
Talk about how important it is for the people in charge to all be kind of like, you know, close and all on the same page and like being around each other.
Yeah. I think and it took a while to get to this. In my 3 years at Layup, there have been a lot of staffing changes, a lot of people who have come and gone, and everyone's contributed to where we are now. I can say now, since probably about June, July, we're finally in a position where we have a team that we're like, yes. And I think our executive director, Chris, sent me this on Instagram the other day, and there's the guy's talking about Navy SEALs. And he says, if you have like an X and Y diagram and you have high performing and you have high trust, the Navy SEALs will take a low performing, high trust person before taking a high performing, low trust individual. I think that piece of trust that we have with one another, that piece of buy-in and selflessness towards the mission that we have with one another goes such a long way. And you have to be able to define that, because there was turbulence when we didn't really know what the mission was, or when it wasn't really clear to every single team member. Right now, with our organization, there are, like you said, we offer a lot of different programs. We serve youth 6 to 29 years old in different ways. We have all sorts of stuff. So it was a little bit more like ambiguous as to like, what is the mission? On a basketball team, you want to win, right? You want to send your kids to what? So there's different clarity of mission. So I think that one, the piece of really understanding what's my why and why am I here? And then you need individuals who are going to own why are they here? Because that piece of high trust, I never managed people until I got to Layup. And now we have a team of over 60 part-time coaches who I don't manage by myself, because John, who's been able to really grow in his role, has helped a lot with that. But there was a while where I did manage by myself, right? And so there's a piece of being able to trust the people that you work with, because I am not going to micromanage and I'm not going to handhold, right? So I think that piece of high trust, I think the piece of high performance is really, really important, because I have to trust that if I'm up grinding doing my sprints, you're also up grinding doing your sprints, right? And not have to check in on that or hold others accountable. I also think that there's just a piece of care and passion for the work and for basketball. And we have all sorts of people. Some of the people on our team never played basketball like that. Myself, Hannah, and Bree now, all three of us were professional athletes, high-level basketball players. And I think a piece of also recognizing that what we try to do at Layup is bring an elite basketball experience with the best of youth work. And so that's something that hasn't really been done before, because they're like polar opposites, right? A lot of youth is considered soft, and a lot of elite basketball is considered whatever else, right? So I think that trying to create that and having that mission together and having a team of people who are high performing and high trust, which is not always the case, right, has really contributed a lot to that. And then I think a really, really important piece to it is just caring about people and investing in people. There's times that we've invested in people, that I've been invested in, that there was no return for Layup on that investment. No return. And I say no return because investing in your people does return for the organization, right? Better people means a better organization. But for example, we're about to go on a 2-week paid organizational pause right now, where no one's using their personal vacation, but everyone is off for 2 weeks, because we just made a crazy push for the last however many months. And now everyone needs to just be better.
Disconnect and
rest, disconnect, and come back better. And then we're going to be able to make another big push for it, right? So I was kind of long-winded and all over the place, but high performing and high trust individuals go a long way. I think investing in people and letting people know I care for you, not for what you do for me.
For what you bring to me.
Yep.
More like a transformational kind of like mindset, instead of like transaction, like, oh, this, you come here, you give me this, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So your role at Layup, what is it that you would say what's the word you use, you own? Like what is it that you say, like, this is me, this is what I bring to the table?
I think I'd love to say I own this. I think everything is very much of a team approach. We have this 80% rule, where if anyone's working on a project that's theirs, let's say, bring it to 80% or bring it as far as you can, and then bring it to the team. And that last 20% being done as a team goes like this. The 80% and the foundation is where there's a lot of work to be done. And so I think that like there's a piece of like every single thing that we do that is to 80% and then 20% with the team, or sometimes it's 95% and 5% with the team, depending on who's owning what. When I first came to Layup, our executive director, Chris, has a background in youth work and has a systems innovation degree and is really, really good with like processes and structure and stuff. And what he said to me was that we had to design coach training. And I was like, huh? Like in all of my basketball experience, like I said, I walked up to K-State, I said hi to coach, rapped a little bit, and then got hired. I didn't have training. You know what I mean? You just do what you do and you're either good or you're not. So that piece of designing a coach training, I wish I had my coach guide here. We just came out with a coach guide. I'll send you a copy. That we developed with Nike and with the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport. So that was one of my big projects. We just had our inaugural 3-on-3 tournament because we were giving kids a lot of after school programming, lunchtime programming, but it was skills and drills. It wasn't really playing, and we wanted to give both coaches and kids a team play experience, right? So having our first 3-on-3 tournament, which I don't think we'll argue this. I think we can agree that 3-on-3 is one of the best ways to teach the game to kids and
absolutely
young coaches. So 3-on-3 has been really cool and really growing that. Also with the culture and with everything that surrounds that, just really fits our model. Culture of basketball programming is so dope. And that was kind of, Chris brought that to Layup because we'd have our kids in summer camp. And then, you know, a lot of times you use basketball as like that carrot. And then once kids are in basketball camp, then you make them sit through, I don't know, motivational speeches and resume building and all of that to say the life skills portion. But what we've done is we've brought sneaker design to Layup. We've brought kids will tie-dye socks and then design sneakers to go with it and then put it on a t-shirt. There'll be different workshops around like photography. We have a photo book coming out of pictures that kids in layup took, because when we have Sarah or our other photographers come in, they not only come in and take pictures of our program for our documentation, but we have a set of cameras that they'll now say, hey, you 5 kids, come, here's your own camera, take pictures through your lens, and you get to try it. So every single thing we do is a teach play model. I'm not ever gonna sit here and talk to the kids. It's always, hey, quick wrap, try it. Quick, more instructions, try it, right? So I think our big buckets are our programming, of course, which is for kids 6 to 14 years old, both co-ed and Sky High, which is our girls only. The culture of basketball programming, which is all of that off-court stuff that the kids, I think if you just plant a seed and let them try it, they'll be able to figure out, maybe I like it, maybe I don't. And then that goes in all sorts of different directions, right? But that's how you future-proof the economy. That's how you bring kids to opportunities for pathways, is by letting them try things that they might have never tried otherwise, right? And then our coach training and development, which is a huge piece of our partnership with Nike, and which is my #1 passion point at Layup.
Hit it.
It is, yep. And that's really just looking at how can you use sport for healing and sport for development? Because it's scientifically proven that repetitive, patterned, and rhythmic activity heals, and it helps with trauma, it helps with regulation, it helps with mental health. And so how do we incorporate that into our programming? How do we teach our coaches about these things? How do we foster like belonging, opportunities to contribute, manageable challenges, right? So big buckets, all this to kind of circle back: coach training and development, on-court programming, and then the culture of basketball. For me in my role, what do I own? As director of basketball operations, it's been the coaching and the programming. And our curriculum is evidence-based. So to be able to get Ontario Trillium funding, to be able to get the Nike partnership, to be able to get Sun Life as one of our multi-year donors, right, has been evidence-based curriculum. So we use the long-term athlete development model, we use the positive youth development framework, we use the coaching girls best practices from Nike, and we use the future of work skills from the World Economic Forum. So those 4 frameworks basically is like, here's the science, here's the research, here's what it says, and here's how we do it through basketball. So if we do XYZ, the kids are going to be better communicators. They're going to be able to manage stress and anxiety. They're going to be able to whatever it may be. And so when you present like, here's what we're doing, here's what's going to happen in 3 months, 3 years, whatever, for the kids, that's been a whole different type of challenge for me, because again, in my coaching experience, you look at a team, how do we win games? We need to work on passing, we need to work on transition defense, we need to work on whatever. And that's what we're working on. Now to do it for youth through a sport for development lens and say, how do I future-proof the economy through basketball? How do I create kids who are mentally healthy and physically well? How do we promote kids to be active for life, right? How do you do these things through basketball? It's a whole different type of curriculum. So that and the coach training and development have been 2 of the big pieces that I've really owned. But like I said, none of it would have been where it is without the team that we're working with.
How do you guys go about, and I love this, how do you guys go about selecting the proper people? Like if let's say a coach comes to you guys, I'm saying proper, I use the word proper, but like if somebody wants to like get involved, or somebody wants to, become a coach and whatnot, like how does the selection process work?
So I chuckled there because it was trial and error for a hot minute. I think we're finally kind of figured out a recipe. So a couple different things to this. One, like I mentioned earlier, we do operate from a place-based approach. So I'm not going to go to Jane and Finch running programming with coaches from Richmond Hill. No. Right? We hire coaches from Jane and Finch to train kids in Jane and Finch. And then what we see has happened is these kids see their coaches at the grocery store. These kids see their coaches going to the high school that they're at, or at the, you know what I mean? And so there's that piece of, again, representation, and that piece of building capacity from within that goes a long way, and that is really transformational. So a part of it is being really intentional about the coaches that we are hiring being representative of the kids that we're serving.
Gotcha.
And another piece of it, which we just implemented this summer for the first time ever, and it was incredible, was this coaching pathway. So like I said, we serve kids 6 to 29. 6 to 14 is in programming. What we've seen is that when kids age out of programming, they still want to be a part of layup, but we don't do basketball programming for that. So now there's a coaching pathway. You can go into volunteering with us. You can be a coach in training, and then you can graduate to being a coach. And then you can graduate to being a lead assistant. And then you can graduate to being a site lead. So for our part-time team, there's that whole pathway of like increased responsibility, increased level of managing a team, etc. And then we have our full-time coaches who are head coaches. And so the goal with this coach pathway is to have a little bit less turnover, because in our head coach role, what we saw is that people think they're going to come in and coach basketball, but you're also a youth worker. There's also administrative responsibilities. There's curriculum, continuous design and development. There's a lot of administrative responsibilities that coaches come in and they're like, I don't want to do this. I want to coach. And we're like, you don't get a full-time coaching job at a charity in Canada if you're not doing these other things. That's not no one is going to pay a salary for you to just coach basketball all day, right? So the goal is that bringing coaches in, and some coaches will join layup and they'll be at the lead assistant position already. They don't need to start as volunteers. If you come in and you know basketball and you're a solid youth worker, you can come in and be a lead assistant, or you can come in and be a site lead. But what we've started to see is that the kids in the programming, when they're 14 or 13, they're excited to be volunteers. And then those volunteers look up to the coaches that are just a level above them or 2 levels above them. And that piece of mentorship, where there's not such a big gap between being a volunteer and being a head coach, right? There's different kind of levels to it. It's really a pathway of growing into these coaching positions. So biggest piece is representation of the communities that we serve. And then the other piece is, are you a great basketball person or are you a great youth worker? And you can be one without the other. If you're the great mix of both, then jackpot, right? Sign a 10-year contract. But yeah, it's been trial and error. It's been trial and error. But I think this summer is the beginning of this summer was our first full cycle of layup out of COVID. Which COVID, we did virtual programming, we did hybrid basketball, we did contactless basketball, we did outdoor basketball, we did all sorts of stuff. So our first kind of cycle coming out of COVID, and having our buckets of culture, basketball, coach development, and programming kind of identified, we're able to have a lot more kind of like structure to what we do, how we do it, and then what we look for in coaches.
So is it kind of like fair to say, so a new coach that kind of comes in, I like what you're saying, because it seems like the biggest value that you have is keeping those coaches, allowing them to kind of like be themselves.
Yes.
But that's huge. Allowing somebody to have their individuality and allow them to be themselves in a new environment.
Yep.
But now when you're talking about, for instance, somebody growing, that person has to want to grow, right? It can't just be like, I know everything, I'm gonna be myself and know everything. But like, I'm trying to understand the perfect sweet spot of like allowing somebody to be themselves, but also kind of like having somebody that's open to growing and kind of like having like that growth mindset.
Yeah, I mean, to be fully truthful with you, there are coaches on our roster who don't have that growth mindset, and that's fine. But you're going to stay at this level and this salary and this type of responsibility for as long as you continue to be complacent. And don't be mad when someone comes in after you and grows faster than you. Because this is not about seniority. This is about meritocracy, right? So I think I have had to learn this time and time again in my life, that I can't want something for someone more than they want it for themselves.
Yeah.
That has started to save me a whole lot of stress and frustration to both myself and the people that I work with. I think that the piece of growth mindset, listen, we do coach training every year. we're working on how many per year. That's still something that's in the works, but we've done different coach trainings every year. Like I said, we have the coach guide. That's a tool and a resource now. I also am a firm believer of real-time training. So, I mean, you know it. If you try to tell a player after they sub off that 4 plays ago, when the back screen happened, they should have curled it instead of, they're going to be like,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah, I got you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, freeze. Here's what happens. So in our programming, the head coaches and the site leads that we have are very important because their job is to look at their coaches and say, okay, the way you just taught that drill, you gave the kids 7 instructions. And then you tried to set the drill up and the kids all forgot the first 4 instructions, of course. So maybe if you started giving 1 or 2 instructions, execute that, give another 2 instructions, execute that, give another 2 instructions, right? So that piece of real-time training of being able to say, hey, coach, great job, try this next time. Or XYZ has been a big piece of coach growth. And then I also just think that like people want to be a part of layup. And people see the work that's being done and they believe in it. And so at the moment of hiring, it's really important to be able to kind of like identify who's in it for the right reasons, who's in it because they care about the kids, because they care about the community, because they love basketball, and who's in it because they need a summer job and just need a paycheck, right?
Yeah.
And another cool thing we started doing just this year was this whole like interview tryouts. So I used to just interview coaches on Google Meet. Hopefully the vibe is right and then they're hired.
Yeah.
Now, there's an initial meeting and then we bring them to a coach training, or we bring them to a programming, or we bring them to an event. And then I say, hey, peers, and I select a group of other coaches who are a part of it. And I say, this person, and this person are here. It's their first time. Pay attention to XYZ and give me your feedback on them. Because people know who I am. They're going to act some type of way when I'm there. They might not act some type of way when someone else is there, right? They show more true colors. So how do they collaborate with you? How do they kind of take instructions? What's their sense of initiative like, right? Those things can be better observed by their peers than they can by me sometimes. And so again, a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Layup has really grown a lot, and we're finally getting in the place where we're able to have more structure to how we do it. But yeah, growth mindset is on you. I'm not owning that. We're going to give you the tools, the resources, and the opportunities to grow. If you want to continue to be complacent, you can be complacent over there.
I'm gonna holler at y'all. So this is great because like I think it kind of like goes into, in my opinion, I see more people more aware of that. Like the new generation of coaches is understanding that how they were coached a lot of the times was for us to make a change on the kids. It's just like, yo, tell the kids to do this differently, tell the kids to do that, da. But now there's like a new wave of resources, and I'm gonna call layup a great resource. There's a new wave of resources like layups, whether it's organizations, whether it's people that do consulting and that kind of stuff, that understand that the best way to get a change on players is to educate our coaches.
Yes. Yes.
And that is something that I don't think was very, I want to say, available. I kind of find like it used to just be like, well, this is how it is. This is just how it is, you know? But like, you know, there's benefits of having like you said, new organizations that come in and start educating these coaches and that kind of stuff. So what kind of, you talked a little bit about it, but like what, for instance, if you were to kind of like give me like a brief, like what kind of things are we looking for to make a coach a great coach, or just somebody to work with the youth? What are some key points?
I think a lot of times you look at coaching, and again, you look at the X's and O's. How much film are you watching? How many players do you know? What comparisons can you make? How can you identify and error detect and correct something in a player's game? Great. Fantastic. Love it. If you could know 3 total things about basketball and be a transformational person, and your players will run through any type of wall for you. So I think when you approach basketball with the person first, it's tricky. It's very tricky. The balance between grace and accountability, the balance between youth work and elite basketball is very tricky because it also depends what environment you're in and what type of performance you need and require and how competitive the program is that you're in and what the goals are, etc. But I do think that you will never go wrong approaching people as people first and approaching people for their development. I think that will always translate into performance on the court, and I think that will always translate into players wanting to learn more, players being more bought in, players being better teammates, players being more coachable, and players having a better mental health and experience, which translates into better performance. So X's and O's are great, but you're coaching people, you're coaching humans, not robots.
That's big. Holy, Micaëlla Riché, thank you so much. Let me see. Talk a bit about what are some of the upcoming projects you guys got going on. Plug, not just layup. What do you got going on and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on having more things going on outside of my work. So stay tuned. That's a progress. It's a blessing and a curse with loving what you do and with it being so intertwined with who you are. I think, as I've mentioned a couple of times, we're kind of going into our first like real cycles and finding our real rhythm. So we just wrapped up our summer programming. It was incredible. We have a documentary coming out. So we have one documentary out on our YouTube. It's a short documentary. We have a second one coming out. It is our 10-year anniversary at Layup. So kind of changing and shifting how we define what we do, because we are changing the future of access to basketball through X, Y, and Z, right? We're not just doing free programs for kids. So keep an eye out for our documentary, probably coming out in December. We have our photo book coming out also probably by the end of this year. We have our second annual 3-on-3 tournament coming up in April at the end of our school year programming, which starts in October. And then summer programming is always fun. So yeah, a lot of stuff in and around the culture of basketball, a lot more stuff with coach development, and a lot more stuff with just continuing to push forward on our encore programming. So it's an exciting time. We have a very innovative team and some high performers. So we're always going to be growing and moving and shaking.
So your Instagram, Layups Instagram, make sure you plug that.
Yes, at layup_basketball is Layup's Instagram, and then my personal one at Micaëlla Riché. So
super great. You said what?
I do follow back.
She does, and always a great person. If ever you're in the gym, this is for anybody. If you're ever in the gym and you see her, just walk up to her. She's one of the nicest people I have ever gotten the pleasure to meet. So, Micaëlla, I appreciate you. I appreciate the resources that you're providing for us coaches to be able to keep getting better. And I'm gonna see you soon for sure.
Thank you so much for having me.